In our current global climate, we're facing challenges never before experienced by this generation. Oppositions where no one seems to have clear directions or answers to the risks facing us. Confrontations like racial and gender unrest, political gerrymandering, toxic leadership, economic crisis, global pandemic, health threats, pre-existing medical conditions, isolation, boredom, and loneliness are driving people to desperation. As a result, people are confused, afraid, anxious, and perplexed, and they need answers to some tough questions and even tougher situations. They are looking into different outlets for answers to gain assurance and consolation. Some have drawn closer to the embrace of family, while others look more towards their friendships, education, and even religion. What we need is a fresh voice of truth and clarity, and not a stale religious echo from the past. There's a re-emerging voice on the horizon that isn't afraid to stand alone and give spiritual and mentally sound direction to a world searching for answers. G. Alfred Palmer offers a voice of sound human development and empowerment to those willing to hear. There's a need for new ideas to old principles, a perspective from a timeless origin, but with current vision, a thought leader who understands what it means to stand alone and speak truth when some are hard of hearing. But if you've been waiting to hear a voice that opens the gates of freedom and breaks the shackles of confusion to allow you to step forward into the dawning of a new and exciting future, then it's time to bridge the gap with Dr. G. Alfred Palmer. He is a dynamic speaker, thought leader, and entrepreneur, equipped to elevate, expand, and extend the development, empowerment, and leadership of his audiences. He stands ready to speak at your next event. His delivery is guaranteed to refresh, entertain, and transform. G. Alfred Palmer bridges the gap from uncertainty to the purpose, to passion, and leadership. Book him today for your next event, and you won't be disappointed.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Red Hot Mic. I am your host, G. Alfred Palmer, and I'm excited about tonight. I'm excited about our time being able to be together, and I'm excited about what we're going to share tonight, because what we're going to share tonight is something that I believe can be life-changing for the people that have an ear to hear. And that's always going to be the important theory that we're going to come with. That it's important that you have an ear to hear. It's time for us to ruminate. It's time for us to elevate, and it's time for us to activate. Let me get rid of this, because people get in the way. You know how that is. Okay, this is our time together. All right, so let's talk about what we want to venture into tonight. I want to talk to you about why he, she don't listen. Why don't they hear you? Why don't they understand you? Why is it that it seems to be this communication that continues to miss? Why is that? Well, it has a lot to do with their human development. Now, we've been talking about this for a little while now, because what's happening now is we hear people, they're talking about they don't want to be this or they don't want to be that they don't want to be recognized by this pronoun or that pronoun, and they want to be answered to as this as opposed to that. And so what we need to do is we need to have a clear understanding and a clear, not only understanding, but knowledge concerning what is human development. Why are we doing in developing or lacking in the development that we should have? Well, we're going to talk about human development tonight, and I want to go into it a little bit more in depth than I have in the past. It's going to be we're going to have to do it in more than one session, because it's just too much information. What I try to do is to present information. It's entertaining. I try to be entertaining because there is a part of me that is an entertainer, but more than anything else, there is the part of me that's more of a prophetic voice, and is more of a part of me that is a teacher. And so I try to couch teaching and prophetic words in an entertaining fashion. And I'm still growing. I'm still growing in this platform. So maybe it's not what you expected or were looking for. Maybe I'll get there. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. But the crux of the matter is, I've got to do what I'm supposed to do. This is my assignment. This is my assignment. You are my mission, and I'm designed for this particular time. So it's important for me to begin to do exactly what I'm doing. So tonight we're going to talk about eight eight elements of human development. Now, why is this important? The reason why human development is important is because what we're finding is in our relationships, we're not able to get along with people for whatever reason. It's a lot to do with their human development. And so what we need to do is to understand how human development works so that we can make better choices. For some of us, it's too late, right? But for those that it's not too late, you're the one I'm talking to. You're the one that I'm focused on. Now, let's understand this. I'm not going to go through all eight tonight. I'm not going to go through all eight elements of human development tonight. I'm only going to try to hit four. I'm going to try to go halfway. And the reason why these elements are important is because we are finding ourselves in mismatched relationships that aren't working because you are at a certain place and they're not at a certain place. Humanly, I should say developmentally, they're not where they need to be. And listen, people can fake for a while. They can fake the funk for a while, but eventually the real them shows up. You know, you can go anywhere in the world, but there's only one bad thing that will always happen, and that is you take you with you. And no matter how, and this is what we do. We see people for who they really are, and we ignore the red flags because it's what we think we want, when in all actuality, it's an opportunity to rescue ourselves. And then what we do is later on, after we've invested our most valued commodity, our time, and we've done that, and we've finally found out that this is the wrong place for me. And so now we up and we leave, but we've missed opportunity. We've missed opportunity, and there may not be the same opportunity coming your way for a while. So what we've got to do is we've got to take advantage of the opportunities as they present themselves. As they present themselves, we've got to be willing to move out and to get involved and to grasp those opportunities when they come, because you never know when the next one's coming. Okay, so human development. Human development. Now, I'm really going to just talk about, there's fairly 6 that I want to talk about, because the other 2 are really 2 that we talk about a lot, and they are a part of our development, and it's really the main reason and that we've been choosing and making the choices that we have been making. And because of that, making those choices the way that we have, we've been missing out on opportunity. And we've been missing opportunities. So here's what we do. The first 2 stages of human development that we seem to continually gauge life by is 1, physiological development. Physiological development basically is he has shoulder, he has built shoulders, he has a V shape, he has muscles, he has biceps, triceps, he is built. So he must be a grown man because he has the physical characteristics and the physical build of a man. He's built like a man. So he must be a man. And that's the physiological development. Physiological development that begins when we hit puberty. So we could be in a relationship with someone that's cognitively, emotionally, mentally in puberty, but has a grown man's body. We could be romantically involved with a woman, or actually a female, because women are developed, females are not. Just like men are developed and males are not. But if she's built, she's got lips, hips, fingertips, and you can see the feminine traits that will let you know that this is a woman. You look at her and you say, "Oh man, that is woman." But as you get to know her, as you get to see the lack of development, even though she's physically mature, she lacks intellectual development. She lacks emotional development. She lacks psychological development. And so because of that, we find ourselves wasting time once again with people who aren't worthy. Not that they are bad people, they're just not developed. And that development, in most cases, is not their fault. Their lack of development, I should say, is not their fault. It's really their parents' fault, because their parents failed to do and to instill in them what was necessary for them to begin to mature. So, all right, let's look at these areas that we want to introduce tonight. The other one that I want to briefly discuss, I just talked about physiological development. The second one is chronological, and we make a big deal over someone's age. They must be grown because they're 18, or they are between 18 and 21, which says that they are chronologically developed. They have enough years in them, but yet they may not have the developmental capacity to operate and to function as an adult. So it's important for us to begin to glean some of these things that I'm going to mention tonight, and we juxtapose them to these individuals and see if these people measure up in these areas. Because the most valuable commodity you have is your time, and you will not get that back. You cannot get time back. We can get money back. The money that you spend, the dinners that you spend, or whatever, you can get those things back. But your time you can never redeem. You can never get it back. But what you can do is use your time wisely. We must use our time wisely, and the way we do that is to begin again to gain a better understanding of some of the things that we're going to talk about here tonight. Okay, I've dilly-dallied enough, so let's talk about the first developmental element, and that is mental development. Mental development is the progressive changes and improvements due to mental maturation. That means mentally, this person should change, this person should improve as they mentally grow up. Now, how do you mentally grow up? You mentally grow up by thinking, by observing, right? By analyzing. Okay? These are the things that you need to do in order to develop mentally. Okay, let's look at something else here. When we start talking about some key characteristics to mental development, one of the first things that we've got to learn how to do is to attend. Now, attending means to direct our attention to a location, object, feature, or event, which is presumed to be to increase processing of our attendant information and make it more prominent in our conscious awareness. In other words, attending means pay attention. If we're going to develop our mental in our mental faculties, we've got to attend, which means we've got to pay attention to things. We've got to look deeply beyond the physical, right? Beyond the chronological, and look deeper into a thing. Now, I'm not saying being suspicious because I hear people say, I'm an empath, and they're not empathic. What they are is suspicious. There's a difference between being empathic and being a suspicious person. See, if you notice, most empaths are women because empathy is an emotion, and so it's something that they focus in on emotionally. But we're not going to get into that tonight. But I want you to understand that attending is very, very crucial. And this is the mistake we make when we fail to attend, because what we do is, if we were to attend to some of the things, the objects, some of the behaviors, what else does it say here? Some of the behaviors, the location, the features, the events, if we were to attend and pay attention to them, we would see the red flags. But see, we see them, but we ignore them, don't we? We don't attend to them. And as a result of not attending to the red flag, we find ourselves in a relationship with someone that we should have passed on. Okay? The next thing, when we start talking about mental development, is perceiving. Perceiving is a sensory experience of the world around us. We have to perceive. It involves both recognizing environmental stimuli and actions in response to this stimuli. See, when we perceive something, what we're doing is we have a sensual perception. Now, there is some sense of sensual perception, or and sensory perception. And when we talk about sensory perception, we're talking about, what we see, hear, think, feel, touch, the five, six senses that we have. And we use those to help us to perceive some things. Now, the perception is not suspicion. What you need to do is, when you perceive a thing, you basically take it and hang it up, and you watch for that to continue to see if there's continuation of that which you perceived. And the more that you see that particular behavior and that you perceive, it will begin to validate itself. But you've got to be looking. Now, I'm not saying being suspicious. Enjoy people, but you begin to understand that people have things with them. We all do. And we've got to be able to understand whether those things, those situations, those hang-ups, those idiosyncrasies that they have, whether those are things that you can live with, or are they deal breakers? Are they deal breakers? And so you have to understand that that's not something that I'm going to be able to deal with for the remainder of my days. I don't want that particular behavior. I don't want to be associated with that particular way of thinking, that particular paradigm, that particular way of thinking. So what we do is we use those perceptions to help us make to have a better understanding of where this person is. The next one that helps us in our mental development is observing. Observing. We talked about that just now, but observing is paying close attention to behaviors, interactions, activities, interests, right? And noticing all those aspects and how they fit in, or lack of fit into how you would live your life. Are those the kinds of things that bother you? Goes right back to what we talked about before. Okay? So it's important for us to observe, to perceive, and to attend. Okay? Those are very important. And the next part of, you might want to write these things down, or you can go back and watch this video again, watch this broadcast again, and get some paper and pencil. I had a mentor of mine who used to say that you're not going to remember just everything. You're going to remember maybe a third of what you hear me say. But if you were to hear and write it down, you'll remember close to 70 to 80%. It increases, it really, really almost triples your ability to maintain and retain information. But what we've got to do is we've got to write some things down. So I would encourage you to go back, watch this, and write some things down. Now, the next piece is, as far as our mental developing, is remembering. Remembering. You see things and you just ignore them, but we should remember them. We should take conscious effort, make conscious effort to remember things, to recollect things, specific times, specific things that were said. I watched some people on, some content creators who have excellent means of memory. They're able to remember things very, very well and repeat those things to you. That's important trait to have when you start talking about mental development. A highly mental developed person has a good memory. A good memory, but you've got to know what you remember, because you know what people will do. They'll say, oh no, I didn't do that. Yeah, you did. And you have to be able to remember the details of it to make sure that you can identify it in a way that they cannot refute it. So remembering is important as well to our mental development. Next is imaging. Imaging. And when we image things, we are basically gives us the mental representation, sensation, and of what we see in our minds is a picture. I always tell people that, when we start talking about purpose, when we start talking about vision, I should say, when we talk about vision is purpose in picture form, and it's basically imaging. So what we've got to do is we got to imagine, image. We got to allow the image of a thing to come forth, and we've got to be able to recognize it. Sometimes we get the image, or we start imaging of certain things. You ever have something that you get an image of something, you say, I don't think I should do that, and so I won't. And it was a good thing that you didn't, because something happened that you didn't want to be a part of, or it was in your best interest that you weren't there, or it was in best interest that you didn't do that particular thing. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But so we got to understand that imaging, or imagining, or imaging, however you want to pronounce it. The next thing is thinking. Thinking is the cognitive ability, like reasoning, problem solving, and thinking. Now, when we do think, it's the importance of not being judgmental, but take things as they are. And what happens so often is we use our paradigms, our way of thinking, right? Our social imaging, the environment that we grew up has played such a factor in our way of thinking that we have problems separating the real from what's going on in our mind. Sure, we've got to be able to think, but you need to be able to understand we've got to take things for what they're worth, and to see them for what they are, and not come with a preconceived notion already. And you hear that all the time. I get that all the time. And people think certain things that I'm saying that I'm not, and they never even asked me to understand, or even thought about a different perspective that I might be coming from, because they already have a preconceived notion and a paradigm that has been established as to this is what you're saying about me, and it's not. Okay, so thinking. Thinking is very important, and I mean, we could go on. Some of the others, problem solving. In mental development, we've got to be able to problem solve. Many people don't have the cognitive skills to be able to problem solve. But if we are going to develop mentally, we have to start with small problems and learn how to solve them. And as we do, we continue to grow, to expand, extend, and to elevate it. And to elevate. Now, the next element, not element, but step in human, or I should say in mental development, is intellect or intelligence. And it says here, according to the AMA, the American Psychological Association, intelligence describes a person's ability to understand complex ideas, to adapt to an environment, and to learn from experience, and to engage in reasoning and decision making in all sorts of situations, both new and familiar. So intelligence is very critical to our development, our mental development. And if he doesn't have intelligence, if she doesn't have intelligence, if the iron should sharpen iron, you can't be in a relationship with someone that can't sharpen you intellectually. You need someone that's going to challenge you and cause you to grow. Okay? So to do that, you have to find someone that has the intellectual capacity to cause you to grow, to expand, to extend, and to elevate it. You hear those words, those three phrases from me, or those three concepts from me a lot. So, intelligence. And then lastly, language. Language development is a higher level of cognitive skills. I say this all the time. People that use foul language demonstrate a lack of language development and cognitive development. Someone say, oh, we use those words. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with it. Yeah, I know what you mean. But we have to learn how to communicate on a higher level than that. I get it. I get sometimes you feel that but it's not about feeling, it's about cognition. It's about intellect. It's about intelligence. We need to elevate ourselves beyond that kind of language. And because what we have to do is that kind of language limits, because what it does, it doesn't really articulate the way that you feel about something. That four-letter word it means a lot, but it can mean one thing to you and another thing to me, and so the communication won't be there. So we need to be able to communicate on a level that we can articulate thoughts, feelings, in a way that it'll get across to the other person, and we're not miscommunicating one another, but that we're operating from the same sheet of music relative to what we're talking about or how we're communicating. So that, in a nutshell, I just gave you some aspects of mental development that we need to identify and develop in and tone and use in ourselves, and to identify those same things and characteristics in others, especially those that we're talking about getting into a relationship with. Because now relationship is important, and I would challenge you to come over to my other station. I have another YouTube station that's called The Purpose Sphere. The Purpose Sphere is basically talks about purpose and talks about the importance of identifying aspects of how to develop and understand why you're here. Now, what we're talking about here, what we're talking about here is from a scientific perspective, but the other station is more of a spiritual perspective. So what we're talking about here, we're talking about characteristics on how to develop mentally, things that we can practice and we can do, and we can move up and to elevate and to extend and expand in, so that we can find individuals that operate on like-minded levels. It's not that we think we're better than people. It's not about that. Because the bottom line is we're here to help people. That's why you're here. But at the same token, the people that are in your life should be able to help you as well. Okay? All right. So that was just the first one. That's just mental development. That's just mental development. Let's talk a little bit about cognitive development. Now, cognitive development and mental development are they support one another. So you're gonna hear some of the kinds of similar things, but yet you have to really pay attention to understand the nuances that are different between both the characteristics that I identified in mental development and those that are going to be mentioned here in cognitive development. Now, let me just give you a definition of cognitive development, because I want you to have this. Okay, cognitive, and I can give it to you, but I did the research, so I want you to have it. The process of growth and change in intellectual mental abilities such as thinking, reasoning, and understanding. Cognitive deals with thinking, reasoning, and understanding. Thinking, reasoning, and understanding. Thinking, reasoning, and understanding. Thinking, reasoning, and understanding. Okay. So when we start talking about those areas, when we look at some of the characteristics that are associated with cognitive development, the first thing that we've got to understand is that cognitive development calls for reasoning. Now, what is reasoning? Analogical reasoning is defined as the process of identifying and transfer of relational structure from a known system or source to a less known system or target. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, when we're reasoning something, we're looking at two things and we're trying to see the differences or the likenesses, and we're trying to see the pros and the cons. We're looking at it from a perspective of how it betters us or how we can better it, okay? And how we can commingle, correlate, or how we can operate or function together. So reasoning becomes very, very important. Reasoning. And see, what we do is with reasoning is a logical or a mental or an intellectual process. And it's not an emotional process. And because it's not an emotional process, what we've got to understand is we've got to turn off the emotion. Emotions get us in trouble, don't they? They get us in trouble. It's the emotion that got you hooked in a relationship that you later saw, once the emotions wore off, you saw that this was not a healthy relationship, right? So what we've got to do is we've got to reel in those emotions from the very outset. We have to learn to be more logical. Okay? We have to be more cognitive. We have to be able to think. We have to be able to think. We have to be able to reason. And what was the last one? I am lost. I lost my place here. It's interesting because when I do these things, I want to make sure that I can do it without but I want you to have the information, because in going and doing the research, that's why I did it, so that we can we can share it with you because I think it's important that you get it. Okay, so cognitive development, the first characteristic that I want you to understand is reasoning. The second goes right back to the mental, and that is intelligence. Intelligence, cognitive intelligence, is referred to as human mental ability and understanding developed through thinking, experiences, and senses. Our intellect and our intelligence is developed by the things that we think, experience, and sense. Okay? The things that we think, experience, and sense is the ability to generate knowledge by using existing information. See, when we learn some things, we use those things to help us down the road. So that's called intelligence. But it's got to be used wisely and not suspiciously. There's a difference between intelligence and suspicion. Okay? Intelligent people aren't suspicious, and suspicious people aren't intelligent. There's a difference between suspicion and inquisitive. Okay? There's a difference. But anyway, let's continue. Intelligence is a characteristic. Again, another characteristic that we use in the mental aspect of development is language. We talked about the importance of language. Language is how thoughts fly through the air from one mind to another. Language. So it's important to be really, really intentional about the language that we use. It's not about using language that's emotionally charged. Our language should be very descriptive enough to be understood so that we can understand one another. That's what's more important than just being able to be mentally or emotionally charged in our language. The next characteristic is memory. We talked about memory before. Memory is a foundation, a fundamental capacity that plays a vital role in social, emotional, and cognitive function. Our memories form the basis of our sense of self, guide our thoughts and decisions, influences our emotional reactions, and allows us to learn. Memory. We have to remember. 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? 3 plus 1 equals 4, right? 5 minus 1 equals 4. We had to remember those things. Remember when we were in school and we were like, I'm not going to ever use this stuff. Why I have to remember? It's not the specific task. It is the mental functioning or the memorization or learning how to memorize that we were learning to do. It wasn't so much learning 3 plus 1 equals 4, even though that's important. But what we have to learn how to do is to use our memory to recall those things, to first put them in our memory, and then also to recall them when needed. We rehearse those things so they become a part of our memory, and then we're able to recall them when we need to recall them. Okay, so memory is a part or a characteristic of cognitive development. So we looked at those three particular, well, actually it's 4. Let me see how many it is. Is reasoning, intelligence, language, memory. Okay? So those 4 are the ones that we need to remember. Yeah. Like I do. Okay, so we're going to look at maybe one more because the hour's is flying by. But I want to look at emotional development. Now this is going to be a little touchy because it's going to touch on some things that maybe some folks may not want to hear. But we're gonna be as gentle as possible, but we're gonna be honest. Okay? Emotional development. Emotional development referred to many as emotional intelligence. Now I want to speak about emotional intelligence. I think emotional intelligence is a very valuable scientific methodology, and we're going to talk more about it because I think it's very, very important in understanding how to use emotions, how to understand emotions in ourselves and in others, and how not to get hooked emotionally by others and by ourselves. So it's important to understand what emotional intelligence is. We're going to look at emotional intelligence on this broadcast, and we're going to talk about some things, some characteristics about emotional intelligence as well, and show that emotional intelligence basically is basically a cognitive understanding of emotionalism. Is a cognitive intellectual understanding of emotionalism and how we are to better control and better understand our emotions. Okay, so yeah, we're going to elaborate more on emotional intelligence, but we want to talk a little bit about emotional development. Now, when we talk about some of the aspects that are important to emotional development, let's look back and let me give you a little definition of emotional development. Learning what feelings and emotions are, understanding how and why they occur, recognizing your own feelings and those of others, and developing effective ways of managing those feelings. That's emotional intelligence. That definition basically fits emotional intelligence to the T. And so, but we'll get back to that on another broadcast. But I want to talk about some of the characteristics of emotional development because this is very important because from a design perspective, the feminine nature is designed to be more emotional, and being that she's to be more emotional and that it is more emotional, it's important that we understand how to rightly navigate emotions. Okay, emotions are important. We are all emotion. Everyone has emotion. Okay, and emotions are a good thing and a necessary thing, but it's not to be dependent in and of itself. We have to be more holistic in how we live our lives and not just I feel. Well, we all feel things, but you could be feeling indigestion. You could be feeling a lot of things that'll pass, and you don't allow those feelings to dictate how you treat or act within a relationship or in a given situation, because it could turn out pretty bad, right? So let's look at some of the characteristics of emotional development. First thing is self-awareness. Okay, self-awareness. When we start talking about emotional self-awareness, it's the capacity to tune into your own feelings, your own inner signals, and to recognize your own feelings and how they affect you and your performance. We've got to learn how to self-identify our feelings, and it's not you're not. What we do is we use a hammer for everything. I'm mad. Mad is not a feeling. Man is not a feeling. We've got to identify feelings. I used to tell my patients, I say, look, when you're wanting to identify a feeling, what you need to do is to quiet yourself and look inside of yourself. Literally look down into yourself, quiet yourself, and listen. And you'll begin to gain a better understanding of what you become aware of, what you're feeling. Okay, so it becomes important that we quiet ourselves and understand that everything's not mad. You're not mad about everything. You could be frustrated about some things, right? Right? You could be disappointed about some things. So these are different things different feelings that we have to be able to express and many of us don't. So I do some things around feeling wheels and things like that to help people to identify and spread their vocabulary and spread their language around the idea of feelings and how to identify feelings. Okay? All right, so self-awareness, self-awareness, self-awareness. Okay? The next characteristic would be motivation. Motivation involves the biological, emotional, social, and cognitive forces that activate behavior. Okay? There are things around us. This is what we've got to understand. There are things around us that will trigger us emotionally. There are forces, there's social, emotional, and cognitive forces around us, in us, that will trigger us. And we need to become more aware of those things. In everyday usage, the term motivation is frequently used to describe why a person does something. The reason why some people do things and act the way they do, the reason why they're motivated is because there is a payoff. Well, why does she argue with everyone? Because there's a payoff. She's getting something out of that. Is why she continues to seek arguments with everyone. And so she does that because it satisfies a personal need for her. It doesn't, and what she doesn't realize is that emotional reaction is isolating her from all those around her and causing her relationships with others to be less productive than they could be if she was to be motivated in a more positive fashion. Okay, so motivation. Next, empathy. Oh, I said something a little bit about empathy earlier. And so empathy can be described as the ability to feel or to imagine another person's emotional experience. Here's what you have to understand. You cannot feel for other people. No, you cannot. You cannot feel their feelings, what they're feeling. You may have felt that feeling before, but it is not the same feeling that they're feeling because they bring a whole different life experience, emotional status, mental status, cognitive status. It's not the same. So the experience is not the same. So empathy would not be the same. And so what we've got to understand is you saying you feel what other people feel. No, 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 you don't. No, you don't. Feelings are to be experienced by other people. It's their way of expressing themselves. It's not for you to feel it for them. You feel your feelings. They feel their feelings. But we want to get inside everyone and to tell them how and what, and you have to no. So, I mean, I don't mean any harm to those who say that they're empaths. It's just that I don't see the evidence for such in a worldview. People are meant to feel for themselves. But anyway, the ability to empathize is an important part of social and emotional development in affecting an individual's behavior toward others and the quality of social relationships. So feeling and empathizing with people, saying I understand how you feel, is nothing wrong with that. But to say that you're feeling what they're feeling right now, that's kind of it's weird. Okay, it's bordering on some things that I think that aren't beneficial. Okay, all right. So anyway, where am I at? Okay, let's back up here. Okay, now I'm going to read that. This is something I wrote. I said no such thing as empaths. These are people who emphasize that emphasize on the feeling of suspicion and distrust and are caught up in feelings or emotions. Mainly, they are females with history of being injured. Now, somebody's going to be mad at that. I told you they're going to be mad, but that's okay. I'm going to say it anyway. Now, the last characteristic, or not the last one, but we got a couple more, is sympathy. Sympathy has been defined by Einsberg et al. 2007 as emotional response stemming from the apprehension of another's emotional state or condition that is not the same as the other person's state or condition, but consists of feelings of sorrow and or concern for others. So we can sympathize with people, right? We can feel sorrow for them. We can feel, but that's not their feelings; it's ours. So sympathy is good. Empathy has its place, right? And so does sympathy, but we've got to understand the difference between the two and implement them in our lives, okay, in the correct fashion. We got to implement them in the correct fashion. Okay, so the next characteristic is social skills. Social and emotional development means how we start to understand who we are, what we are feeling, and what to expect when interacting with other people. Social skills. Some of us lack social skills. We don't do well with people. And the reason we don't do well with people is because we weren't exposed to that coming up. It all goes back to childhood, right? It really does go back to childhood. So, social skills. We've got to develop social skills. It is the development of being able to form and sustain positive relationships. We've got to be able to form and sustain positive relationships. Now, that doesn't mean that you become a footstool for people. Relationships should be an exchange that benefits both people. They'll never benefit each other. You know, I used to hear this song that's talked about, 50-50 love. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. Oh, he's got to love me. She's got to love me the way that I love her. That's never going to be the case. Someone will always love more than the other. The most important thing is to find that you should never find yourself constantly being the one that's loving more than the love that you're getting. But there's going to be situations where you're going to receive more than you give and vice versa. That's a functional relationship. Okay, so that's important. Social skills. The next characteristic is self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to understand and manage your behavior and your reactions to feelings and things that are happening around you. Now, this is difficult sometimes for folks. It's hard to regulate yourself and rein yourself in sometimes, especially when it's plain to see what that person is doing, right? How they're mistreating. And what we've got to learn how to do is we got to learn how to regulate our reactions to strong emotions like frustration, excitement, anger, and embarrassment. We've got to calm down and learn how to control and self-regulate ourselves, breathing, counting, whatever we need to do to help us to be able to be more emotionally developed. Now, I have one more that I'm going to go through. I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly because we still have a little bit of time, but I really want to close it up here. I hate holding you really, really long. The last one is the philosophical development. You have to have a philosophical development in your life, and so many times we don't. We don't know what we believe. Now let's look at a definition of what philosophical development is. As defined by Kohlberg and Gillian in 1971, the concept of philosophical stages of development implies an invariance of sequence in developments, a regularity of stepwise progression, regardless of culture, teaching, and or circumstance. Now, that seems pretty confusing in and of itself. But what philosophical development is your ability to put yourself on a plane philosophically, and how you live and see the world and see yourself in the world, and how you progress in the world, and how the world treats you, and how you react to how the world treats you philosophically, and how you operate, saying that things like do unto others as they do unto you. That's a philosophical view. Okay? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a philosophical viewpoint. And so we use that to navigate and operate in our daily activities, okay, philosophically. And so we have those kinds of paradigms, philosophical ideas, methods, and ideologies that help govern the way we operate and live our lives. So let me go back down here and close this portion out. Again, because, when we start talking about philosophical development, is the process of transformation of sequential and hierarchical stages of awareness. See, philosophical means that we're operating from a hierarchical kind of way of thinking. It's kind of lofty, kind of in our heads, right? It's kind of feeling, kind of not, but it's our way of us thinking and operating, and it kind of guides the way we behave, okay? So when we start talking about the different stages within our philosophical development, there's theological, there's metaphysics, and then there's scientific. These are aspects of the philosophical arena that we could go in, but we're not going to go into it tonight. Okay, so we've covered 4 of the 8. Actually, we really covered more than 4 because I briefly talked about the first 2. So we really covered 6. We really covered 6 very, very briefly, but we're gonna go into the last few. It's actually only 2 more in our next session, our next session together, in our next broadcast, because it's important that we understand that this developmental process is how we grow, is how we show, is how we go. And so it's important that if we're going to develop relationships with people, that first it's important to develop self-relationship. So many times I find people, they don't even have a good self-relationship. You ever heard a person that really doesn't like being by themselves? I don't like being by myself. I like being around a bunch of people. You don't even like your own company. If you like your own company, you gotta have some noise. You gotta have something going on. You can't be quiet with yourself. You've got to learn how to be quiet with yourself and begin to invoke and begin to use some of these things that we're talking about here tonight. It's not easy. And some of the things that I'm explaining, I'm not doing the greatest job of it tonight. Some days I explain things better than I do other days. And tonight I'm not hitting on everything, but that's fine, because I'll come back and I'll do better the next time, and it'll make more sense the next time, because belief comes by hearing and continually hearing it and continually hearing it. Because this is not the first time that I've mentioned these elements of human development. It's not. This is the first time that I've gone more in depth into them, but it's not the first time that I've mentioned them. And I will continue to mention them because it's important that we understand that human development is going to cause us to be able to have relationships. And relationships are going to help us to cure what ails our community, culture, and our clan. We need your help to heal our land. You have a healing touch in a specific area that only you have. And so it's important for us to gain an understanding of that. And if we're going to get into relationships with people, it's important that we understand where they are relationally or developmentally. Where it's important we understand their mental development. It's important that we understand their cognitive development. It's important that we understand their emotional development. It's important that we understand their philosophical development. It's important that we understand their physiological development. It's important that we understand their chronological development. It's important that we understand their intellectual development. And it's important that we understand their psychological development. Those are critical aspects of human nature. And failure to understand those have placed us in situations and in relationships that have not benefited us. They haven't. Once the newness of it wears off, we begin to find out, oh, there's some deal breakers in here, you know? And when we find ourselves in relationships that we say, well, you know, I can work with that. I can work with that. I'm willing. It's not that if I had my druthers, I wouldn't, but I can work with that. But that's a deal breaker. Okay? And so we've got to learn how to identify those through these 8 developmental processes to allow us to function better and make better choices. It's not, and we want to know what you bring to the table. You know, here's what they bring to the table: cognitive development, mental development, right? They bring emotional development, physiological. I just mentioned that's what they bring to the table. Now the question is, can you identify and work through that to begin to understand if that's the person that you want to be with, or is it not? Because the bottom line is we all going to have baggage. We're all going to have baggage. Now the question is, can you deal with that baggage? I remember a song Erykah Badu used to sing called Bag Lady. And she talks about all the bags that the bag lady has. So when we start talking about the bags that the bag lady has, the question is, you got so many bags, you're gonna miss the bus, you're gonna miss everything because there's too many bags. So what we've got to learn to minimize the bags by what we do is developing ourselves and then helping others develop themselves. Well, that's it for this session. I hope you got something out of it. We're going to go back, and at our next session, we're going to go back and we're going to finish the last few elements in developmental growth, or human development, I should say. And what we're going to do after that, is we're going to get into something really, really profound. We're going to get into something really, really profound, because what's going on? What do you see happening on the landscape of our culture? What do you see right now? See, you have to look out on the horizon and see what's going on. Marvin Gaye used to say, "What's going on?" There's some things that are transpiring on the horizon. There's some things that are taking place that can change the culture here in the United States concerning the Supreme Court. There are some things that are transpiring that will change culture, that are changing culture right now. What are they? What are they that are affecting your life right now? And so we need to be able to learn how to see. And so what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about vision. We're going to talk about vision and what vision is and how we are to move about and how vision plays an important part in our role in our lives and how we are to have vision and what vision really is supposed to do for us. Well, I hope you got something out of this. I did. And I want to toast to you. I want to toast to what you gained here, how you ruminated, elevated, and activated tonight. Thank you so much for being with me. And I'm going to ask you once again to subscribe, to like, and to share, and hit the notification bell, please, so that you can know when we have more content. There's so much more to come. There's so much more to come. Now, I'll get better. I'll get better. I will. I know I will, because there's things I've been out of touch with doing some of this for a long time, where I was doing it on a daily basis, and I was really good at it, and now I need to sharpen my skills again, and this allows me to do it. This allows me to do it. So I want to thank you. Cheers. I want to thank you for coming. And you know how we do. You know how we do. Because it's one of those things where I enjoy music. And I hope you do too. But this is Dr. J. Alfred Palmer saying to you, until the next time, peace. Who that?